In this week's program, we're visiting with Deputy Director Scott Peterson to talk about the legislative process and what role the Game and Fish Department plays. I'm Mike Anderson with the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. Scott, the 69th Legislative Assembly started January 7th. How does the Game and Fish funding work, and are we mandated by the legislature?
So that's a good way to preface this discussion, Mike, but we are what is referred to up there as a special fund agency. And so, the Reader's Digest version of that is that we simply do not get any general state tax dollars. Our money always comes from our sales of hunting, fishing license, and then we match that with federal excise taxes. So when somebody goes down and buys a firearm or a fishing rod or tackle or ammunition, there's an excise tax placed on that, on those sporting goods. The Fish and Wildlife Service collects that money, and then at the end of the year, they redistribute that back to the states based on a couple things. Land mass is one, but probably more importantly for us, it's also based on the number of hunting and fishing licenses we sell. And then for every 75 cents of that money that we get, we then match that with 25 cents. So there's a 75-25 cost share, and that's essentially the money that we use to do most, if not all, of our management activities across the state.
And where does the legislature come in for us then?
So even though we are a self-funded or special fund agency, we still need to get spending authority from the legislative body. So we go before them. Right now there's an executive budget that the governor submits, and we have to, a lot of times that changes, but we have to go in and we have to justify every bit of that budget. And so even though it's technically our customer base's dollars that are contributed to that, we still need to get authority and approval from the legislature to spend every penny of that.
Scott, every legislative session, there's always bills introduced that outdoorsmen and women should be aware of.
Yeah.
What is the legislative process?
So, the first thing that happens is that, and this all happens well before the legislative session starts, but constituents will contact their legislators with an idea. And they're pitching those ideas to their legislators, from their districts. And if a legislator feels like those have merit, they'll introduce those bills. And once they get introduced, and then they get assigned a committee. Now, the vast majority of our bills go to either the House or Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. That's where, again, the vast majority of our bills are headed toward that committee. And then at some point, a committee hearing will be assigned for each individual bill. And that's where people can get up and state their case, right? Either in favor or in opposition of it. And there's a lot of lobbyists that wander around the halls of the Capitol, and they watch that, and so they will show up and they'll testify either in favor or in opposition, or sometimes from our standpoint, we don't necessarily support or oppose every bill. Sometimes we're there to provide supporting information. The chairman of the committee will say, hey, I'd like to hear from Game and Fish on this and see what they have to say. And maybe it's a numbers thing. Maybe they want to know what sort of an effect this particular bill would have. And each bill, Mike, also has, I should have mentioned this maybe earlier, but each bill has to have a fiscal impact note that goes along with it. And the agencies, of course, we prepare those for every game and fish related bills. Some bills may have a fiscal impact, others don't, but you have to take a look at that and file that information for every bill as well.
And Scott, if it's a do pass out of the committee, then what happens?
If it's a do pass out of the committee, then it goes to the floor. Even if it's a do not pass, those bills all will reach the floor of the chamber of the origin, right? So if it was introduced as a House bill, it'll go to the House chamber. If it dies there, if it doesn't pass, it's done. It goes away. And same way with the Senate side, right? If it's introduced on the Senate side, and regardless of whether that bill gets a do not pass or do pass out of committee, it will go to the floor. Now, here's what happens if let's just say it's a House bill, and so if it starts in the House and it gets doesn't matter really whether it gets a do not pass or a do pass, but if it gets passed on the floor in the House chamber, then it goes over to the Senate. And there's basically a time period where they call it crossover, where all the House bills that passed in the House go over to the Senate and vice versa. And then if that bill gets passed on the Senate side, and if it's exactly verbatim the way the House passed it, then it goes to the governor's desk for signature. But if it gets passed on the Senate and it's a different version than the House passed, then it goes to conference committee. And the conference committee is made up of members from both chambers.
And that's the legislative process.
That's the legislative process, exactly.
If you're a sportsman or woman, Scott, does it pay for outdoor enthusiasts to contact their legislators if they feel strongly about a bill?
I think it's very important, Mike, and in some ways I would even argue that maybe it's our obligation, our responsibility. I think, and I say this, I tell people that the system, the process is designed around public input. And I see that so often that I think there's a lot of our constituents that maybe think, well, we'll let Game and Fish take care of that. And we try to do the best we can in advocating for our constituents. But if you have a personal interest in a bill, I would encourage you to get involved, right? Reach out and contact your legislator. It's not difficult. You don't even have to actually a lot of times talk personally to your legislator. There's you could send them a text or an email. And I really believe that if you visit with legislators, if I'm a legislator, and I'm not obviously, but if I'm a legislator and I'm sitting down there on a floor hearing, and a vote comes up, when I'm trying to make that decision about whether to vote yea or nay, I would like to know what my constituents are thinking. Now, the difficult part comes in is that, say they get 50 calls for and 50 calls against, and then I'm sure that makes it more difficult. But it's kind of like voting. I believe it's not only our right, it's our obligation, our responsibility to make our voices heard. If you consider what we do, for the resources and constituents of North Dakota important, then certainly get involved.
Because it can impact your...
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
How can somebody find the outdoors-related bills?
Well, there's probably a ton of different ways to do it, Mike, but I got to put a plug in for our communications folks, because the easiest and, in my opinion, the best way to do that for our folks is go to our website. gf.nd.gov, because our folks are tracking every game and fish related bill. They track the action. If it goes out of committee with a due pass, they record that. If it goes to the floor, they record the floor vote. And I say this, it's almost real time. And so it's very, very quick reference on just the bills that affect the way that we do business for our constituents. That's my recommendation. If you can't make a committee hearing, is there a way to view that hearing? Yeah, so, about, was it 2 or 3 sessions ago, all the committee hearings and floor sessions are live streamed now. And so if you just go to the legislative website and go to video, it lists all of the current hearings / meetings, floor sessions that are in session. You can watch those live, and if you can't watch them live, they're archived. So you can go back in a week later. If somebody says, "Geez, I wish I would have sat in on that floor session or that committee hearing," they're archived. Go back in there and find it, and you can hear everything and watch everything that was said in those hearings and floor sessions. And by the way, Mike, I didn't mention this, but there is an 80-day limit to the legislative session. So they're limited by law to 80 legislative days. Now, if they don't gavel in, then that's not considered a legislative day. So they could be up at the Capitol and doing committee business and not have it count toward a legislative day. Scott, this is the time of year, obviously, the session started. Are we hearing any bills that are going to be introduced for outdoors related stuff? We always, it's like you said, Mike, at this time of year we hear rumors, maybe hearsay, and to chase a lot of that would be speculation, but we really don't know until they're posted, for sure. However, I will tell you that we are working on a couple of bills on behalf of our constituents that are going to be filed, and we can talk about those if you'd like. Yeah. But one of those deals with the way that we allocate archery licensed to non-residents who want to hunt mule deer, because currently right now it says in state law that we shall make 15% of those licenses available based on the immediately preceding year's mule deer gun allocations, right? And so we'd like to change that, to change those two words immediately preceding to current. And it should be a simple change, but it'll allow us to start allocating our non-resident mule deer archery tags more in sync with the actual mule deer population. It should improve our management abilities. And so the other one deals with, so we from time to time we have folks reach out to us. Typically it's a high school student, or it could be a young college student that may be interested in going to work for the Game and Fish Department or another wildlife related agency. And we currently, because of risk management and liability reasons, we can't have people what we would call ride-alongs, right? They put them in our state fleet vehicles. And so we've worked with a legislator who is going to introduce that on our behalf, that will give us specific authority, and I should say if it's passed, to do ride-alongs and to do that kind of work, because we view that as a huge workforce recruitment tool for us. Now, some of those folks might ultimately say, well, geez, man, after I spent that time with our district game warden, this might not be for me. But if we can get a few of those every year that go into the field and we can get them interested in coming to work for us at some point, that's a win for us. And so that's the other bill that I can tell you for sure that is going to be introduced on our behalf.
To follow all the bills, where do you go again?
Follow all the bills. The best place is our website, gf.nd.gov.
A lot of great information, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you.